Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Rockland Roundtable podcast. I'm Beth Cefalu, the County Strategic Communications Director.
And I'm Beth's co-host, Jenna Nazario, Director of Economic Development, Tourism, and Film. And today we have a very special episode with two wonderful individuals that I get to say I work with all the time, and they are from the RBA. So please introduce yourselves.
Ken Zebrowski.
Jeffrey Greenberg.
And what do you both do for the RBA?
Yes.
So I'm the president of the RBA, and
I'm the CEO.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. So I think the first question is,
What is the RBA?
Exactly.
well, technically it's the Rockland Business Association. That's what RBA stands for. It's an organization that's been around since the 1960s. It was formed by a group of business owners at the time that felt like there needed to be an organization dedicated to increasing economic development, economic opportunities in the county, but also fostering sort of the cultural and social opportunities in the county. So it's been around a long time. It's gone through a few different iterations, which has brought us to the present day where Jeff, myself, a dedicated board, and Al Samuels as a senior advisor have embarked on RBA 2.0, which is sort of what we are forging a new path and a new chapter for the Business Association here in Rockland. So the RBA does a host of things. Let me talk about a couple, and I'll kick it over to Jeff to talk about a few more. But first and foremost, we like to talk about ourselves as the voice of business. We have some of the largest businesses here in Rockland down to solo practitioners. We also have not-for-profits and government entities and a host of other folks that form sort of the nucleus of the RBA. But we advocate for policies that are economically beneficial, that grow our economy, that put us in a position to thrive into the future and not just focusing on the past. We have an entire advocacy agenda. We hope to break through the noise, which I think is more important now than ever. Certainly we have a fractured media environment that's different now than it was 25 or 30 years ago. And I think it's important to have a voice out there, whether it's on social media, in traditional media sources, or even just at our events, that is focusing on data-backed policies, that's pushing for affordability, that's pushing for growth, and pushing for things that are going to really springboard Rockland County into the future. That's a help to not just businesses, but to residents and taxpayers as well.
Yeah, we take a two-person approach, focus on the advocacy portion. Ken has a lot of experience from that. I focus on the sort of connectivity of the individuals and the companies within the county. Basically, the elevator pitches, I facilitate those relationships between government officials, municipalities, universities, small, medium, large-sized businesses, and banks, institutions, so that you can achieve your goals in the quickest amount of time. You are only as strong as your Rolodex, and by being part of the RBA, we try to facilitate those relationships to connect you with the people who can get you phase 1 to phase 2, phase 2 to phase 3 in the quickest amount of time, because time is money in business.
Yeah, so it sounds like the RBA really is got their pulse on what's going on, and you're the boots on the ground, which is really nice to hear, because I think a lot of businesses sometimes really need that advocate to help them get to the next step. So when you're working with these businesses and you do have a very diverse group that's part of your association, what are you seeing as some of the things that they want policymakers to understand more? Or what are some of the changes that they're looking to see?
We have such a diverse roster of businesses that oftentimes Jeff and I need to take the time to understand our members, sit with them and talk with them, because they're all different. Certainly our large employers and large businesses, sometimes they're focusing on sort of the macro economic environmental factors. You know, they're obviously worried about costs and taxes, but they all have individual concerns based upon how their business operates. I like to give Pfizer as an example. When you go in and talk to Pfizer, you may think they're talking about pharmaceutical policy. But when they talk with us, they talk about the fact that they have a lot of folks that live in New York City and don't have transportation opportunities to get up here. So they literally run a shuttle. They talk about housing and the need for them to attract folks to have a housing stock that not only attracts families, but attracts young professionals that are coming into their business. When we meet with folks in the construction or development, they're talking about different maybe state policies or local policies or planning board regulations and how that may affect them. And then when we get down to small businesses, they may talk about obviously costs and those type of things, but also the ability to get staffing, the ability, local infrastructure and roads, and where they're seeing, maybe a drop off in business. So Jeff and I really try to understand each individual business, create an ecosystem where they can thrive and learn off of each other, but also ways where we can kind of advocate for them or at least connect them to our policymakers to make positive change.
That seems hard. To juggle all of that, those are not small hurdles. When you're talking about housing, transit, these are some of the biggest issues that this county has faced for years. How do you navigate stuff like that with these businesses?
Well, we can't help you if we don't know you. So it's more hospitality, right? We need to know you as an individual. Once you're part of our network, once you're coming to our luncheons, once you're coming to our council meetings, you're explaining where you're coming from, who you are, your personality. Then we start to get an idea of where you're coming from, what you're trying to do. And by building that personal relationship, engaging, getting people out from behind computers, behind, the Zooms, right? Looking people in the eyes, shaking hands, you start to build camaraderie. And by doing that, more people want to work together, they naturally connect, and then you naturally problem solve. Like things just come from being in a room together.
Yep. And business owners are busy just like families are busy now. I feel like it seems like it's different now than it was like 30 or 40 years ago. And so I try to, based upon my previous experience, I spent almost 2 decades in government. I try to provide the pathways for folks to understand those problems. So when I speak to like a Pfizer about transportation and talk about our 1-seat ride options, it really is the gateway, the tunnel, which is a 3. We really need to I look at it as 3 puzzle pieces, right? You need the new tunnel, you need the Bergen Loop, and you need the full Penn Station redevelopment. So when you talk to business owners like that, it helps them connect the dots so that they know what to advocate for. If you talk about a local business owner having maybe some infrastructure issues, oftentimes it's, they don't know what's a county road, what's a state road, what's a town road, who's making those decisions, what has to get on, what's the NIMTIC is, and how you get on a 5-year capital plan. So some of it, I try to just connect those dots for folks, and I just have that, level of knowledge from doing it for a long time and working with a lot of the local officials and, folks up in the state.
But you also have other subcommittees that you have in the RBA too, right? That you've kind of helped delegate some of those tasks to. So you want to talk about some of your subcommittees?
We call them councils, but we have anywhere from, we have an energy council, we have a hospitality and tourism, a women's leadership, we're starting a healthcare council. We also have HR councils.
And what do those councils do?
So they're essentially subsidiaries of the Rockland Business Association. So by getting the sort of C-suite leaders of industries, whether it's a nonprofit, we have a tremendous nonprofit community in the RBA and in this county in general. So you're talking about being in a room with CEOs, presidents who head up multi-million-dollar not-for-profit companies. By being in that room, they can formulate and problem solve the issues within their community and also steer some sort of advocacy toward what they're trying to achieve and pushing it up to Ken and I so that we can fulfill, or be that cog that connects them to Albany or to the community or to government officials so that, these needs are met. And so they're basically incubators for ideas and for solutions.
We, as I said, we have a diverse roster of businesses. So when we have like a large organizational type of event, whether it's a luncheon, we try to get speakers and topics and things that appeal to a broad cross section. But it's really helpful also for folks to have really individualized things. So that's what also the councils do, is they provide individualized programming that may be important to hospitality, that may be important to our marketing council, but may not be of interest to 150 or folks for a larger event. So, but those are really important.
Vice versa, we have a small business council, right? Some of the speakers at maybe a luncheon who are on that macro level aren't going to speak to a restaurant or a retail sector. But by being part of that small business council, you're able to promote and network your company and your product, and also meet the other people who have solved those problems. So whatever your problem is, right, there's very few problems in the scheme of things, but there are people who might not be in your industry who have solved those problems. So, but if you're on that same sort of level of small business, medium business, right, they can steer you to the bank that could help you solve the problem, or the accountant that could help you solve the problem. The problems are consistent. It's just finding the right people, the people who are qualified to help you get through that issue. And that's what a small business council would do for a small business owner.
Yeah. Well, and the best part about it is that you're all in it together, right? Everything's connected. So
Great
you
network.
want, even though it's competition in some ways, you want the other businesses to succeed, because the better they do, the better you'll do. We all grow together.
Exactly. So kind of going back to advocacy and housing, because that seems to be a trending topic in all of our discussions. But what's really nice about it is everyone has a different vantage point of what housing really means to their individual sector or individual needs. So you see it from the business perspective, and that's the economic perspective. And a lot of business owners are also residents here in Rockland, and they've invested a lot of time and money here. So when we talk about the downtown revitalization, or we talk about new affordable housing or mixed market housing, what impact would that have on our businesses? But also too, how can people advocate more for the business side of that?
Do you want to start with the branding of the word affordable housing? Because I think it is possibly the worst branding in the history of branding.
It's a triggering word.
It's affordable. People have to understand that affordable housing has to have a relative factor to it. Okay, so we live in a nice middle upper class community. We have good schools. We have safety. We're the third safest county in America, right? The idea that the median income in this county is over six figures, right? So what is affordable housing? Affordable housing could be people making $100,000 a year. It could be $95,000. So affordable housing is this broad term that sort of, immediately conjures up, fears and resentment and hesitation amongst the community. So should we define, in terms of like, what are we talking about? Are we talking about bringing in young working professionals and independent singles to lay roots in this community so that they build up equity, so that they can, get married one day, build a family, and want to stay here and sort of replenish our school system and keep that circle of life going? So to me, that is my primary focus when we talk about housing, is how do we get that new energy, and what's going to be attractive for that new energy to come here?
The RBA advocates for an increase in a diverse housing stock. We need it all. And there's a place for it all. Certainly, we have to take into consideration things like traffic and quality of life issues. But I believe, and I believe the RBA believes, that you cannot stagnate. Like, the moment you start to stagnate is the moment a community really starts to run into trouble. And I know, a lot of us, I spent my entire life here in Rockland County and look back fondly to the county of the 1980s. You can't turn back the clock. I mean, you can't turn back the clock in any part of life, right? I'm 45 years old. I can't go back to being 25 years old.
No. Sometimes we think we can.
Yes.
You're as young as you feel.
But It really, but that diverse housing stock is important to the business community, right? Certainly, first of all, you need folks to shop at businesses.
Yes.
We all like our vibrant downtowns, right? We all say, well, why can't we have this, wherever you are? Maybe you're in like Mystic, Connecticut or something like that. Well, in order to get that, you need people. So our downtowns need people shopping. We need to take an ownership of our downtowns, right? I think we all probably wish we spent less time on Amazon and more time in our downtown shops, but we also need people shopping there, and that needs an increase in housing. But we also need folks that are able to work there and a diversity of people that can work there. If you look what's happened to our housing stock and housing prices since the pandemic, it's really unaffordable.
Insane. Yeah.
It really is unaffordable.
So unaffordable.
And a lot of, I think to myself, thank God that I bought and sold when I did. But, that little starter house that I was able to buy before I was married or had kids doesn't even exist anymore. That little 1,100 square foot farmhouse that I was able to buy before I got married, 2 incomes, continued. It doesn't exist. And so, I was a young professional at the time. And to not have that ability, it really starts to be a problem for the economy as a whole, and especially the businesses.
Well, you were talking about having, young professionals or people coming here, staying here, having their family here. They can't even do it because they can't afford to live here. So they're all leaving.
Right. And sort of the community that's already here and established, the worst thing that they can do for themselves, or in my perspective, is sort of like pulling up the ladder, like closing the door
Which
to everyone
they want
else.
to.
Sometimes,
There's a lot of pushback for development.
To Ken's point, people do reflect back. They see themselves as, when they were young, when they had young kids. Like, it's imprinted in your mind. Like, the best time of your life is when you're falling in love, when you got married, when you had that first kid, when you started making a little bit of money. And, if you're 45, 55, 65, there's still that imprint in your mind, right? And then, snap of a finger, things start to regress, right? Your home, your value of your home is increased. You've done well with your investments, and you're not really thinking, you're thinking, we're good, my family's good, but you're not seeing sort of the invisible regression that's going on. So I think the young kids call it vibes, right? With regards to you need to start building new vibes that are going to attract those younger professionals to feel like this can be home. And when we were growing up, the Nanuet Mall, that was home. That was the Spring Valley Marketplace was home. Like, we would go to the movies. Our parents would eat dinner next door, right? After the movie was over, we'd get a snack. We'd get ice cream. It was a social scene. People were walking on the sidewalks. Nobody really wanted to go home. It was a play date, right? Yeah. Adult play dates. So how do we figure out, how do we energize this community to recreate that and not fall back on, well, I could just watch Netflix on my couch on my big TV.
I think the Palisades Mall is a good example of this. So when I was growing up, obviously the Nanuet Mall was a special place too. But then we got this even larger mall. It was, I think, one of the largest malls in the country at that time. There were no payphones. I had to use my beeper just to get in touch with my dad to come pick me up. But it had everything. Like, you could eat, you could go to the movies, you could shop, you could spend hours there, you could ice skate. Like, it was just the place for kids to have a good time. And even now when I go back, it's nostalgic. I'm like, I'm going to go to Dave & Buster's and play some games. But I know even then, speaking to people who were, making decisions when it was developing, there was a lot of resistance, a lot of hesitation. But look what it did for the county. And so, I think people need to start to realize that, yes, change is coming, but it's an opportunity for you to be a part of that change and decide what is the next thing. And that's kind of my next question to you. What do you see as really the next thing? Like, what's cool? What are the vibes, as you said? What do people want to see kind of in the
Well,
in
I
the
think
business
this
world?
is cool in general. I think just making an effort, one, is cool. Having a podcast for the county, I think that's very cool.
Oh,
Thanks,
thank
Jeffrey.
You're very welcome. That was my portion of flattery for the afternoon. Ken, what do you want to say on?
I think what people want is, I kind of mentioned before how they look somewhere else and then say, and for me, I also think, you look at something else as finished. I use the example of like the Wegmans right over our border.
My favorite. Mm-hmm.
But I do think if that were proposed here, it would have been met with significant opposition. But now you look at it finished and you're like, oh, this is what a mixed use development looks like. Mm-hmm. We can't be afraid of every development. Yes, we need to think about our infrastructure and our state highways and those things like that, but we need to continue to grow and reinvent ourselves. You hear about it all the time, right? People want a Trader Joe's or people want this. Well, the town supervisor can't just decide that he wants a Trader Joe's there, right? These are people own private property and people are able to sell and buy and do things within certain constraints, local, zoning constraints. But in order to get a Trader Joe's or to have the downtown shops you want, you need to create an entire ecosystem that is conducive to that. Mm-hmm. And that means shoppers, that means folks that can work there. And in order to have folks that can work there, folks need to be able to live within a place and have some transportation options to get there. So you need to create the ecosystem. And so that means not just, fighting on the Facebook pages, but actually paying attention and thinking about it and looking at examples in other places and supporting our local officials to be able to achieve it.
If you drive the Eastern Corridor, all the way down to North Carolina, South Carolina, I have family down there. Cary, North Carolina has the shops at Nanuet. Mm-hmm. But what they did was they built it with 3-story apartments, right? So on Monday through Thursday, the people who live in those apartments are subsidizing the retail and the commercial stores downstairs, the restaurants. They're creating an atmosphere. Thursday through, overlapping Thursday through Sunday, that's the profit for those companies. That's where the community is coming and playing, right? They have an ice skating rink that leads into a restaurant, that leads into the movie theater. You basically could spend your whole day with your family there. But they built it in small phases. Phase 1 worked, right? They built up the community there, sold out in seconds. Now it's time for phase 2 for the next level, right? So it's things like that, especially in the Northeast where, we have 4 seasons. It is currently snowing outside for the nth time. Yeah. So we have to be smart about, how do you create that atmosphere, right? When I lived in the city, there's endless bars. When you're walking down the street with your friends, it's 3 or 4 of you, you peek into a bar. If there's no one in the bar, you walk to the next place, right? You're looking again for those vibes, right? So if you don't have an established community as part of that retail community, when someone drives by, they're saying, oh, there's 2 people in there. Why do I want to go in there? So you're not leading them to water. You have to have that established energy and momentum, and so that other people start hearing, oh, well, that place is full. Friday night, that's the place to go to. Thursday night, that's the place to go to. Oh, that coffee shop, they have a poetry night. They have a, open mic. They have a this, right? That's what's going to generate people coming out. But you have to have that sort of residential retail balance so that, capital that comes here isn't scared of, making the wrong decision.
Mm-hmm. We've talked to our environmental resources department, and what we're trying to convey is that there's a balance between development and open space, right? There's a balance between preserving our natural resources, but making sure that we do kind of, update this county, revitalize these districts, and as you're kind of mentioning, that 20-minute city. So do you hear a lot of people when they're, talking about development or just the businesses, is there discussion about, overdevelopment or, protecting the natural resource and finding that balance in the different towns and villages that we have?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of fear of development and overdevelopment. Some of it's just based on traffic. Some of it's based on a fear of the unknown. Some of it's based on, natural resources. But I think we need to think of things more holistically, right? We have to develop a theory and then execute it. if you want to talk about open space, then our malls, our downtowns is the place to increase housing, right? Because you can keep your parks and your things and have other sort of green spaces if you have more of a development district. But you can't say no to everything. You can't say no there and no here, right?
Yeah. It's got to go somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I think we need to get away from the negativity that I feel like there's a common phenomenon to just sort of like complain about where you live, right? I think you hear it in songs and other places. But we have a lot here, right? And if you drive around New York, which I've done and gone to a lot of places, we have a lot here that we should be proud of. We've got work to do. We've got challenges and we got things we need to overcome. But we do have a vibrancy to our mall. Anybody who hasn't gone to the Palisades Mall in a while, go on a Friday or Saturday night, and I'm sure you'll be shocked by the amount of action and people going on there. And I like you, after COVID, I remember saying to myself, I miss the mall, And I don't know if you have little kids like me, but they kind of run around the mall. It's just kind of nice.
Yeah, it's such a great mall.
Exactly. Expend your energy, please.
We have we have a stadium up in Pomona, right? We do have walkable downtowns. We do have thriving small businesses, places that only maybe have a Walmart or a couple chain restaurants would die for. Let's sort of celebrate that and figure out how to continue to grow and reinvent ourselves for the future. You have to continue to reinvent yourself for the future. It is not going to go back to 30 or 40 years ago.
What would you say? Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to, just to get on that point, what would you say to people that are just very resistant and say, I want it to stay the way it is. I don't want it to develop more. Like, what would you say to them?
I would say that I don't think you understand what the future will look like if you do that. When you see certain stores go out, go out of business, or think about the fact that they are going out of business because they don't have enough customers and there's not enough economic activity in the area. So I would say, like you, have a nostalgia for what the county was when in the 1980s or, when I was growing up. But I think that's like a false choice. It's not that or this. It's either this or a start to have the communities break down. And I would look at other places around the state that were once vibrant that are not that anymore. And you don't have to drive too far away. I don't want to talk negatively about any communities, but you can drive up throughout the Hudson Valley and see places that are thriving and see places where it's completely boarded up old sort of strip malls and bigger malls.
So, and we want to be very clear. So this county is full of single unit residential neighborhoods that have beautiful forests, beautiful trees. I live right off of the reservoir. We're not talking about putting 15-story apartment complexes next door to a single unit home. Everything that we're talking about here are those, 1980s, 1990s euphoric retail commercial parcels of land that the new world necessitates a hybrid model. Whether we're talking about humans or we're talking about we're essentially sandcastles, right? Like you build a beautiful sandcastle on the beach, you take a picture, it's done, the wind starts blowing at it, it starts crushing it, and by the end of the day, it's gone. So if you don't work out, your body breaks down. If you're not working out, your commercial, industry, it's going to break down. If you're not changing with the times, if you're not adapting with technology, it's going to break down. We do have a lot of history in Rockland County. I know there's a lot of 250-year celebration, but I always talk to my wife, I never want to be known as historic Rockland County, because when you drive anywhere and it's known as historic, right?
We're old.
We're old. We don't want to be old, right? Even if we are old, we don't want to feel old. We want to be part of, the new.
I would also say, it's a good question, that you got to look at data, right? A lot of times it's math. And so when you talk about what you want somewhere, developers and folks that own retail or whatever you're hoping to be somewhere, they literally look at data and math, and we could get this information. I think the RBA should talk about it a little bit more, but X amount of residents you need in a given area to support X amount of businesses in retail. Like, that is based upon historical data-backed things. If you talk to a developer and you say, well, there should be X amount of units here and not Y amount of units here, the math doesn't work. So it's either Y or it's not, or it's nothing, and it's sort of sold to something else, you know. So I would also try to have a data-backed conversation, not just one that's emotional.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you both give really thoughtful responses, and you both grew up here, as did I. We're trying to get you to convert here, which we're slowly but surely.
But I'm a perfect example of this problem, because even though I would say make good money, I can't afford to live here. It would be about $3,000 a month for me to have a 1-bedroom here, which is just it's crazy. It's insane. Yeah. So I commute. And that's what's happening to more people that are younger. They can't afford to come back here, so they don't come back. And little by little, you're going to have that giant pocket growing of people missing. You know, like, you're seeing the depletion in the schools, and then that's eventually going to lead to the depletion in business around. I mean, it's all connected, and that's what people don't get. Like, even in Clarkstown, there's all that development going on, and people are just, you know, you see them on social media complaining, criticizing it, saying they don't want it here. And it's just like you guys had pointed out, where is it going to go? Does it go in the places that are already dense and have the infrastructure, or do you put it in the places that have open space?
Yeah.
Right.
What we appreciate about the RBI is, you know, from the county, the Economic Development and Tourism and Film Department, we collaborate with you. We collaborate with the IDA because I think we all have something to say, again, from our vantage points, right? So you can talk about it from the business perspective. We can really talk about it from the data perspective, enrollment, what it looks like for the county we're doing the comprehensive plan. What does the 20-year county footprint look like if we don't start to develop these opportunities? People, I think, often get afraid because it sometimes is always portrayed that we only look at the developer's perspective and the bottom line. But it's a really thoughtful, engaging conversation with multiple stakeholders to determine where things should go, why they should go there, and why we would advocate for them. So again, you grew up here. You're very passionate about this because you still live here. You're raising your families here. And so it's nice to hear that, because you're fighting for the same investment that you're fighting for other residents, because you too are residents here.
I was fighting for it when I was 17. I was fighting for the concept of bringing nice things to the county, having people inspired by new restaurants, new talent, spending their money here. I never understood why people were, you know, so excited to spend their money to leave, whether it was to go to Westchester or go to New York City. They didn't want to spend that kind of price here, even though they had the means to afford it, right? And I come from a place where, like, I want beauty in my backyard. I want this place to be as cultured as possible, as beautiful as possible. I want, you know, options, and I want excitement. And so when I came back here after spending my time outside, I was one of those people who was possibly, I'm never coming back, right? My parents are still here, and if you knock on a bunch of doors here, you're going to hear people from my parents' generation say, my kids said they were never gonna come back. They're never gonna come back. There's, you know, and this goes to that, like, my daughter's growing up. Before I blink, you know, I snap my fingers. She's gonna be an adult. She's gonna be in college. She's gonna live her life, explore. Is she gonna want to come back? And is there gonna be opportunity for her to come back? As Ken said, you know, how do you invest? How do you build that equity? You know, so that when you are ready to buy Ken's house or his mother's house or my mother's house, right? How do you have the funds to do that? And do you have the passion to want to continue that? And that comes from laying those roots here and giving them those affordable apartment options in those sort of retail sectors, things like that.
Yeah, I 100% appreciate our suburban quality of life. And this is not an attack on that. You need to sort of develop and keep a vibrancy even in a suburban community. And that's what this is about. And you're right. I grew up here. My family goes back here in various ways a long time. You know, my dad would tell me stories of sort of whistling through the woods because he worked at Delwood Country Club and would walk back to where I grew up in New City, and it was all woods along sort of that main street. I mean, heck, my grandfather grew up in Rockland Lake before it was a state park. So there were obviously a lot of changes since then. We need to learn from mistakes. We need to learn from successes, but we can't just say no, because I believe that will lead to a degradation of the entire sort of economy around here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as we wrap up, we have maybe one final question, but if you could see one thing in Rockland in the next year, 5 years, what would it be?
I would say housing built around some of our major main streets and malls. I think it's a no-brainer.
It's a good one. It's smart.
Yeah, I think, you know, in Nanuet, you'd be along the train lines, and Palisades, you would provide sort of young professionals, folks, you know, all along the economic spectrum, an ability to be walkable to supermarkets, to entertainment, et cetera. I really think that's a no-brainer.
Okay.
Yeah, same thing as I started, like the connectivity of it all, whether it is, you know, these major projects are not far from each other. You know, there's something, the iCampus has beautiful potential, tremendous opportunities. The waterfront down in Haverstraw, what's going on at the Shops at Nanuet or the Palisades Center. These are all sort of chapters of a story that once, you know, we have a plan, or once they have a plan, and there's a connectivity to it all and an understanding to it all, I think it's a compounded interest, and they all work together symbiotically to create a greater Rockland.
Yeah, absolutely. Great answers.
Yeah.
And how can members join the RBA? I guess that'll be our final question.
So our
People
website
wanna join.
is rocklandbusiness.org. You can see the councils, the events page. We have a monthly luncheon. You don't have to be a member to come to the luncheon. You pay a couple bucks more, but get a feel for who we are. We'll introduce ourselves, introduce you to the room, get a feel of it. You're welcome to attend a council meeting as well. We work on an annual membership dues based on the number of employees within your organization.
Okay, great.
Excellent.
Is there anything else you two would want to add before we wrap up?
I just want to thank you for this medium. You know, I think it's important to be able to talk to people in this sort of long form way and not.
Well, we're talking about changing with the times and adapting, and that's what this is all about.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
Except I don't know if we need cameras, but that's fine. We'll talk about that. Okay.
No, this is wonderful. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Well, you're very welcome. And thank you so much for coming. We really do appreciate these conversations and kind of hearing different perspectives from different organizations. So we absolutely appreciate you being on, and we welcome you back anytime.
that's
Thank
right.
you.
Anytime.
Yes,
Yeah. All right. And that's another episode of the Rockland Roundtable. Thanks again.